Hey folks, how you doing? Well, the biggest question that I get asked in the spring when people see me planting hops in pots is, what is the soil that I use for my hops plants that I plant in pots? Well, you're in luck. Tip number 55 from Hops World today. Max Raphael here. Let's do it. Hops in pots. Do-it-yourself soil mix. Hey, here we are in Hops World, and I'm glad you could be with me today to explain how we make our soil to plant hops in pots. I said soil because the truth is there's really no soil involved in our soil. It's really a substrate, a soilless substrate. So we'll get right into it and explain the ingredients that we use, the basic ingredients. It's real simple, and over time I've come up with this, but it's nothing scientific. If you look at all the potting soil out there and all the garden centers and your home centers, it all has mostly the same ingredients. I always look at the ingredients on the back. Basically, it has either peat moss or coco coir. It has some kind of organic compound, organic material, and perlite. Now some have some lobster shavings, mushroom waste. Even this one here has yucca. I'm sure it's probably the waste of yucca from some yucca factory, the shavings that we use in our own compost pile, or like potato skins. And a lot of them have some kind of fertilizer. It doesn't say exactly. This one here has very little fertilizer. Looking at the NPK that's on the pack too, I always look at that. The typical potting soil doesn't have too much fertilizer, and mostly because the majority of the material in it is inert and doesn't give too much nutrients to the plants. The object is to retain water. So what they use is typically peat moss is what we use, or you can use a coco coir. A coco coir is actually pH neutral, which is probably a little better, but it's harder to get and it's more expensive. So this is what you buy. It comes in a big, huge bulk pack. It's way cheaper than potting soil. You can actually get it a lot finer than this. This is a little bit rough, has some sticks and stems, but it still works perfect. This peat moss, actually, most of it comes from Canada. Here's a bag. It's in its rough cut. It's sphagnum peat moss. I assume this comes from Canada too. And here is peat moss in its raw form. It's basically decayed plant matter that falls into a bog, a wet area, and becomes anaerobic, which means there's no oxygen, and starts to rot. Then they pull that out and dry it out, and this is what comes of it. They grind it up 100%, and you get this. If you grind it more, it'll be really super fine, and they use it actually for seed starting also. So in our recipe, the basic things, there's 4 things, real simple, and we're almost duplicating potting soil, is the peat moss, water, 1 cup of water, perlite, and compost, organic material. And the proportions are the same. I usually use a bucket when I make soil because this is going to barely make enough to fill 1 pot. But I'm doing a little small scale here, and I'm using the red Solo cup. You could use a shot glass, but you could use a big container. You can mix this right on the ground. You can mix it in a big giant, I have it huge pots, or even in a wheelbarrow. So the proportions are simple. 5, 1, 2, 3. It's really easy to remember. There's different people use different proportions, especially in the perlite. I've even seen use the same organic material as the peat moss, but this turns out the best for me. 5 is the peat moss. So basically 5 cups of peat moss. What I start with. You should think about, if you're gonna mix a lot, wear a little dust mask. Peat moss gets really dusty, especially when it's dry. The next is 1, 2, 3. Water, 1, perlite, 2, organic matter, 3. So, 1, water. I add water now to the peat moss because peat moss in general, especially in the beginning, repels water. And it's not a bad idea if you have time to let the peat moss sit in water till it really soaks the water in. And when you mix, it seems like it's not mixing, but it really is. So you mix and mix and mix. Okay, so we're mixed and mixed and mixed, and you want to get to the point where when you squeeze this, it doesn't barely drip any water, maybe just a drop or two, but nothing comes out, but it sticks together. But then when you rub it, it crumbles. I love crumbly dirt, crumbly soil. Squeeze it, I can't even get a drop of water out of it, but look at it. It sticks together, it's nice and moist, but it crumbles up perfect. Be sure you don't add too much water. This mixture, this amount right here, is perfect. So, that's 1. Number 2, perlite. If you look at a lot of topsoils, it's amazing how little perlite that they use. I swear they just put perlite in there so that when you open the bag and you look at it, you swear it's some super special recipe or something. It's like magic. Must be something in there, but there's one little white speck every 3-4 inches throughout the dirt. If you look at mine, it's got snowflakes all throughout every 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch. So, we're looking good. Next, last, organic material. This is our compost. Nice black, rich. I love the smell of dirt. I love getting my fingernails dirty. So, compost, you can buy it. You can get cow manures, probably the cheapest, right at your home center or your garden center. I love mushroom compost. If you find any little sticks, I'd pull them out, a couple big ones. No big deal though, if they're in there. Our compost, depending on how old it is, sometimes you'll find an eggshell. Doesn't hurt anything. It'll keep decaying. But you can use, what's really good is worm castings, humus. They sell all kinds of different compost. If you buy it, it's ready to use. You can get compost the cheapest way. Right from most garden centers sell it by the truckload. If you have a pickup, you go there, they'll load it real cheap. It's like 35 bucks for as much as you need for a few years. You only have a few plants for your lifetime. Or you can just buy a little if you bring some buckets. And you can get it delivered. They do deliver also. That's compost is ready to go, ready to use. If you want to make your own, go online. I'm not going to go into how to make compost. There's a million different ways. But there we go. We mixed our compost. And that's it. That's the basis. And if you compare this to your typical potting soil, other than we have way more perlite, it's really the same. The object of this soil is that it's nice and airy and fluffy and crumbly. I love this crumbliness. I know the soil is really rich and perfect for plants. It's easy for the roots to get down into. It's nice and airy, and it'll hold a lot of moisture because of the peat moss. That's real important for young plants. Now, what we do personally with our soil is we pump it up. What I mean by that, peat moss typically is acidic. So, hops like about pH 6.5, between 6 and 7. Now, peat moss can be down to 4.5, 5. So we do add just a little bit of lime to our soil when we're putting it in pots, and even if we're using peat moss, we'll use a little bit of lime in the ground. Down in Brazil, all the soil is acidic, so we use tons of lime. But it's not just for the pH. This adds calcium and some slight magnesium that your plant's going to use. So we use 1 teaspoon of lime. I'm going to take a pinch because I always wanted to do this. Stick to plants, not cooking. Sorry about that. Well, if you insist on putting fertilizers, there's 2 options. I would suggest an organic fertilizer with a very low NPK rating, like from 4 to 6 maximum. That way you don't risk burning your plants. Remember, when fertilizers come, it's less is definitely more. And the second option is actually what we use. It's a product called Osmocote. Okay, it's not organic, but we're not organic. And what this is a slow release fertilizer. So what that means is there's little balls that are coated, and it takes up to 3, 4, up to 6 months for these balls to dissolve when the water hits them, either from irrigation or from the rain, and they slowly release the nutrients into the ground. So, although the nutrient levels are higher, as you can see here at 14%, there's a lot less risk of burning your plants because the nutrients are released slowly into the soil. And on this proportion here, doing the calculations, it works out to 1 tablespoon of Osmocote. What the hell? Might as well. Is that better? No. Now we mix well. And these plants that go in here, or rhizomes, are going to be good to go without any extra nutrients needed for a while. Now remember, you can mix it up, especially with your organic material, and you don't need the lime or the other products at the end. You really need the 4 basic products, but if you can have access to free cow manure, chicken manure, if there's a cave where there's bat droppings somewhere. But remember, you have to let that stuff sit for a couple months at least. You can't throw it right on. The stuff you buy in the store has been sitting and it's ready to use right away. So the right way to do it is let this actually sit with the lime. It takes a while to really help the soil and change the pH. But because you incorporated it in the soil, it'll be quicker. And as you water the plants or it rains, the pH is going to get better and better. So your plants will actually get healthier and healthier. So I hope you liked our tip for today, how we make our soil and our substrate, should I say. And I know you want to see us plant some plants, but our next video is going to be how we plant rhizomes in pots and then in the ground. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe and hit the notices. You'll see what videos are coming up. We're going to have videos every other day, every day or 2. Thanks, guys. Cheers to life.